the Shemon Esrei, the Amida, the format that the opening brachas are always praise. The center brachas are supplications. We make requests. And the closing, we close with thanks. But whenever we make a request, before we request from Hashem anything, we always we acknowledge that we appreciate who he is, and we acknowledge who he is. And therefore, we begin with the first bracha, Agodol Hagid V'Anora, Chalkel Chaim B'Chesed, Ato Kodosh, Shimcha Kodosh, and then we begin asking. We find that the format of the Shachris, we have first, besides the Birchas HaShach, we have Psukei de Zimra, then we have Birchas Kriyat Shema, and then we have the Shemon Esrei. We enter into the audience. So the Mishabura cites the commentators that why do we have Psukei de Zimra? The reason why we have Psukei de Zimra is to put ourselves in the position that we be worthy to be able to stand before Hashem. Because since we speak his praises, which meaning Psukei de Zimra, verses of praise, and the way they were chosen, not only the Baruch Shema Asher Yishtabach, but even the various psukim or chapters of Tehillim. So after we acknowledge Hashem in all these various contexts, we speak his praises, and then we accept his dominion, which is Kriyat Shema, then we enter into the audience. So always we have to put ourselves in the position that we're worthy to be answered or to have the audience because we acknowledge who Hashem is. It's only because of the acknowledgement, therefore, we're worthy of having the audience, and Hashem should be attentive to our requests. Moshe Rabbeinu, before he gives the bracha to Klal Yisrael, he speaks about the praises of Hashem. Vayomar, Hashem miSinai bo. Hashem had come from Sinai. V'zorach miSeir lomo, and he had radiated from Seir. Seir was the location of what? Of Edom, Esav. Hofia mi'Aporon. He appeared from Mount Paran, that's where Yishmael is. V'osam Rivos Kodesh. And he came with his myriads of angels of holiness. Now, Revova means 10,000. Rivos means 20,000. We'll see in a moment. Why is Moshe Rabbeinu saying he came with just his myriads or only 20,000 angels? Mimino Eish Dos Lomo. And from his right, there's Eish Dos. It's the fire of law, Lomo, forever. Let's see Rashi. Yom Hashem Sinei bo, Posach Tchila B'Shvachu Shel Mokom. First, he begins with speaking about the praises of Hashem. Why Hashem is so special. Then he begins discussing the needs of Klal Yisrael. And this is all the approach, the manner in which we ingratiate ourselves with Hashem. That they are worthy that the bracha should come upon them. They are worthy. B'Sinai bo, Yotzet l'rosam shebo l'shiat sitach zohor. Hashem came out towards us when we were at the foot of the mountain. K'chosan hayotzet l'katbil pnei kalo, like a groom comes to greet the bride. That's where Hashem came to greet us at Sinai. Hashem b'Sinai bo, he came from Sinai out towards us. Shenemar likras elokim. Lamadu sheyotza kenegdom. Based the Mechilta, that Hashem went out towards us. We had mentioned that at time of Kabbalah Torah, the Torah tells us, Vayichan om keneged ahor. The people had camped opposite the mountain. So Rashi over there makes it a point. Vayichan is singular. It should have said Vayachnu, right, in the plural. Why does it tell us Vayichan in the singular? That when Klal Yisrael were at opposite the mountain, they were Kish Echad V'Leiv Echad. They like one entity with one perspective. That's ki ish echad b'leiv echad. Therefore, it says in the singular rather than the plural, although there were 600,000 men above the age of 20, plus women and children. The children below the age of 20, there were millions of people there. Nevertheless, because of the level of unification, of unity, therefore it's Vayichan singular. So we discussed this in the past. Why is that piece of information important for us to know? That they were unified to that degree when they stood opposite the mountain. So we'd mentioned many times that what is the basis, or what was the prerequisite for us to be worthy to receive the Torah at Sinai, besides believing in Hashem, which happened with the slaughtering of the Korban Pesach and the circumcision in Egypt before we left. We have to reflect Hashem's characteristics. Hashem is Echad on the absolute level. We as human beings, as a people, we had to have that level of unification to establish a commonality between ourselves and Hashem. That's why the Torah goes out of its way to say the reason why we were qualified to be taken is because Vayichan, rather than Vayachnu. Okay? So when Hashem was the Chosan Likra Scholar, Hashem Yisina boy came to greet us, we were opposite the mountain. What exactly was our profile? Our profile reflected compatibility, because we had that characteristic of yichud, of achdus, of unity. Therefore, it was kechosen likras kalo. I'd mentioned in the past the famous. I just mentioned it yesterday. It was given in class. The famous Beilus trial in Russia. There was a lawyer Beilus, and he was accused that he had murdered a Christian child, a girl. And it was an international issue over here. And if he would have been found guilty, this was in the Tsarist time in Russia, it would have sparked pogroms in all the cities throughout Russia. Literally, hundreds of thousands of Jews would have been murdered. Because if it was found out that it was trumped up charges, the whole thing was false. But because the Tsarist government they were rabid anti-Semites, they wanted to spark this pogrom. So the prosecutor had all his facts in order, and he would come with claims which would be very difficult for them to respond. And he'll do his research. One of the claims he's going to come to prove that Beilis, because he's a Jew, doesn't value the life of a Christian, because the Gemara tells us, we just had it with Elio in the Beis HaKvoros, Reb Shimon Yochai says, why do the remains of a non-Jew, why don't they contaminate in the oil? And why are you permitted to go on a grave of a Gentile, not a Jewish grave, if you're a Kohen? It's based on a pasuk in Yechezkel, because Yechezkel says, Atem kri modem hem lo kri modem. Those are the words of the Gemara, and that's the interpretation of the pasuk. You're called the Adam, the world, the nations were not called Adam. So literally, it doesn't sound so nice. You're the human being; they're not human beings. They're sub-humans. That is the Jewish perspective. If that's the case, this is the last nail in the coffin of Beilis. It's over. Well, how do you respond to that? How do you explain it? So they went to consult with Meir Shapiro, Zecher Tzaddik Livrocha. Meir Shapiro was the founder of the Daf Yomi. He was the Rav in Lublin, Poland, and he established a famous yeshiva in Lublin, Chachmei Lublin. And he was a member of the Sem in Poland, even though he was a Rosh Yeshiva. They had Jews in the parliament of Poland, Polish parliament. He was there, and he was beyond genius. So they went to consult with him. How should they prepare for this trial? So he said to them immediately, the claim they're going to come against you, and if you can't respond, you're doomed. And they're going to come up and they can quote the passage from the Gemara, Atem kri modem hem lo kri modem. How are you going to respond? They were dumbfounded. They had no idea what to say. So he said, I'm going to tell you what to say, and this answer will be a correct answer, and you'll pull the rug out from under this prosecutor. He says there's only one word in the Hebrew language which does not have a plural. The word is Adam. Every other singular has a plural. Adam, there's no plural for Adam. So what does the Torah say? Atem kriv Adam, and they're not kriv Adam. So he says the Beilis trial was international. All Jews throughout Israel, through the world, wherever they were, even Northern Hemisphere, any country in Europe, they were raising money for the defense of Beilis. Middle East, wherever they were. So he said, if you have an ethnic group, and there's a problem within that ethnic group, another ethnic group is concerned about that ethnic group. The answer is that's them, that's us. With the Jewish people, we're Adam, we're one entity. We're not different entities. There's no plural. It's singular. Singular without plural. So that's what it means. Atem Kriim Adam. The level of unity among Jews is one of a kind. There's no such thing. It's not my problem. A Jew's problem is every Jew's problem. Therefore, every Jew contributed financially and did whatever he could do, not to leave politically, diplomatically, not to leave a stone unturned for the defense of Beilis. And it happens. So it comes to the trial, and sure enough, the prosecutor pulls this out of his sleeve, quotes the Gemara. You see, Jews don't value the lives of non-Jews. We're considered subhuman. So he went to explain, the defense attorney explained, no, this is what it means. They were like dumbfounded. And because of that, he was vindicated. That's what happened. Vayichan. What's Vayichan? Singular. That's a prerequisite for Kabbalas Torah. Kish echad b'lei v'echad. The famous, they speak about this. By Egypt, it says, Umitzrayim nosei achareim. When the Egyptians pursued us out of Egypt, when they realized we're not coming back, it says, Umitzrayim nosei achareim. So Rashi explains has two interpretations. It should say Umitzrayim nosim, not in the singular. It should say in the plural. Why does it say noseya? So one interpretation is it was the archangel of Egypt was traveling after us. So that's singular. The other is they were b'lei v'echad kish echad. They were committed perspective, and therefore they were unified as if they were one person. By us, by Kabbalah, it says kish echad b'lei v'echad. We were one person with one mindset. The Egyptians, they were one mindset, therefore they were one person. They needed a unifying factor to establish them as one. They had the same perspective because they were all going back after the Jews to get their money back, to get the possessions that we had borrowed from them. By us, our essence is one. Every Jew is a component in the network called the Jewish people. All our neshamas are interconnected. We're one. That's Ish Echad. Ish Echad, b'lei v'echad. Not only we one in our essence, but even perspective-wise, we're unified. By them, no, it's b'lei v'echad kish echad. The lei v'echad caused them to be Ish Echad. But if they would have a common cause, each one goes in his own direction. As a result of that, Hashem Yisini Boch, it was Kechosin L'Kriskala, because there was this commonality of Echad. Therefore, it was like the groom going out to greet his bride. Right? Right? You're one. You're one. Your name is one. And who's like your people, Israel? There's only one such a nation. So how do we reflect the commonality? We're goy echad boretz. We're one of a kind. There's no nation in the world which is like the Jewish people. So we're echad. That we have that level of uniqueness. That's the echad. And because of that, that establishes the commonality between us and Hashem.
And Rabbi, in the past,
1 second. We find there's a Yalkut that, based on the Gemara, what's the reason why The nations of the world did not have the Torah because they rejected it. He offered it and they turned it down. The Yalkut says, based on the pasuk beginning of Bamidbar, that because their pedigree was totally illegitimate, as a result of that, that's the reason why they weren't qualified for the Kabbalah Torah. Because Torah tells us when we were counted, it says, the Jews brought their documents of pedigree. The Goyim, the Egyptians, and the nations of the world, they came with a claim. Why are you giving the Torah to the Jews? What about us? So Hashem says, do you have your documents of pedigree? Are you pure? You're all issues of illegitimate. You're all illegitimate. Incest, adultery, everything under the sun. When they heard that, he says, my children, they're pure. They're purebreds. You people are not purebreds. You're all illegitimate. Therefore, you're not qualified. So when they heard that, it says, "Come over on Yeshua," the pasuk in Eshes Chayil. The children stood up and they extolled her. They never heard of such a thing. The Jews, they had that level of purity because we know for a fact there was only one woman in Egypt that was defiled during this 210-year period. The story of Shlomo Bas Divri. That's the one who Moshe Rabbeinu had killed the Egyptian. Now, why, if you're not a purebred, you don't have that level of purity, there's incest, adultery, why don't you qualify? Why is that somehow an impediment to qualify to become Hashem's people, not to receive the Torah? Now, we find at the beginning of Bereshis, when Hashem created the world, and he created different species of animals, different species in agriculture, plantings of fruits. The Torah says it continuously and repeats itself, lemino. He created this species, lemino, for its own species. And that lemino, and repeats it many times over. What does that mean? On a Torah level, crossbreeding animals, crossbreeding plants, it's not permitted. The world was created with a certain profile. Each species has to be pure, and it's the way Hashem created it. When we go and we crossbreed, whether it's crops, animals, any living species, it's Torah violation. Jews not permitted to do it. Because that's the way God says that's the way the world has to function within a context of limino. Okay? Now, incest, adultery. What's the problem with that? We're talking about not only physical level. If it's not a person's wife, if it's sibling, or the certain type of relationships, you don't intermingle those relationships. Those relationships have to be separate. Each one's exclusive in its own right. Once you go and you disrupt that, that's already a breach in limino. That's not the way God created the world. That's not the profile of the world that Hashem wants. Hashem created the world to be the location to facilitate the Torah. You people you have no relevance to that. Because since you breached that limino, you're all illegitimate, you cross those lines, you're not that human being that originally was meant to have the Torah. Klal Yisrael, and that's what he says, my children, they have documents of pedigree. Every one of them. They're the child of the parent, the wife was never defiled, would never engage with any other man other than her husband. Therefore, we're qualified, and you people are not qualified. It's the same idea. It's the way to be able to reflect what Hashem's characteristics of that orderliness. And Hashem sets order. As a result of that, therefore, only we were qualified and not the nations of the world to receive the Torah at Sinai. He first went to Esav's descendants that they should receive the Torah. They weren't interested. They rejected it. He appeared to them he was coming from Harparan. To them means to the Jews. He went to the descendants of Ishmael that they should receive the Torah. Also, they turned it down. They weren't interested. But also the Yisrael, then he finally came to Yisrael, Mirivos Kodesh, with his myriads of Kodesh. The Imo Mitzas Rivos Malchia Kodesh. He came Mirivos Kodesh. mean, he didn't bring his full entourage of angels. It was of his Ribos Kodesh. Imo miktsas Ribos Malchi Kodesh, velo kulam, velo rubam. Not all of them, not even the majority. Velo kederch bosavidom. It's not like a mortal. A mortal, when he comes and he wants you to understand who he is, what does he do? He brings out everything, his full regalia to show who he is. Shemarek kovod oshrov sefarto biyom chuposo. Day he gets married. If you remember, England, there was once when Prince Charles got married, they were the wedding procession. What it was something, was a level of royalty, pomp, and everything, one of a kind. What that was, it's Malchus, that's what it is. And to have an appreciation of what they are, Hashem does not need you to appreciate who he is by showing all his power. So he came Mirivos Kodesh, Eishdos. The law was came in fire. Shahoisa Ksuva Me'os Lefonov. The Eish Chora Al Gabi Eish Levona. It was black fire Al Gabi Eish Levona. It was fire. The background was fire, and the writing was fire. Black letters on white fire. Noselhem Beluchos Ksav Yad Yimino. What's Yimino? Yimino. Kavayochel. It's as if it was written. It was from God's right hand. Davarache Eshdos Shenitzlehem Mitoch Eish. It was given from the fires. It says at Sinai, the mountain billowed with smoke and fire, and the Torah Hashem spoke to Klal Yisrael, and they trembled. There was fire. Okay. It's interesting. In Pashas Azinu, tells us that Yaakov chevel nachloso. Yaakov's chevel. What's a chevel? Chevel is a rope. So it says Yaakov had his grandfather and his father and himself. So he had the schus of three. There were three merits. He came from Avram. He had his father's schus and his own schus. It's like a three-plied thread. It's a much more stronger thread. A three-plied thread doesn't tear easily. There's greater strength. Not like Esav or Yishmael. I mean, they could come and say, we have great pedigree. It's not compared. Their pedigree is not compared to Yaakov's pedigree. Because Yaakov's pedigree, so it's interesting. So it seems to be, the Torah tells he offered the Torah to Esav and to Yishmael. There's no mention in the pasuk to the rest of the nations of the world, but the Gemara says he offered it to all the nations of the world. So why does the Torah only speak about these two nations? The answer is because these were the nations of pedigree. Esav is the son of Yitzchak. He's the twin brother of Yaakov. Yishmael was the son of Avram, the founding father of the world, introducing monotheism. So they were the first to be offered. They were the first. After he offered them, he went to the other nations. But that's the reason why they're described here as the first ones to have they have the first rights of refusal. Seir, who was considered, he had the schus of his father in Avram, then Yishmael, who had only the schus of his father. They turned it down. He offered it the whole world. They all turned it down. Then he came to Klal Yisrael. And that's when we said Nasa v'Nishma.